Oh, and great backdrop as well. So I want to transition into the faith element of it. Like you're
Yeah.
clear that faith is a part of your business strategy,
Right.
and you've worked a lot in the corporate world, and that is just at least over the last 10, 15 years, that's not been something that's generally been accepted. So what does that look
Right.
like in real world decisions, coaching, especially
Yeah.
these leaders that are in a corporate position?
100%. Well, one of the things I will tell you, just, when I first started my business, we were coming out of a life changing experience of my wife being healed from cancer. And that's a whole long story we could get into. But I mean, it was miraculous at the level that it really got my attention. And I started to be introduced to the power of prayer at a whole other level. And I was committed, like God was moving in our lives. And I wanted to do everything for God. So I went to this coach training program. I came back not knowing what I was doing, especially business wise. And I prayed. I'm like, God, I'm going to be a Christian coach. And I felt God just in my heart of hearts say, please don't be a coach that's a Christian. Don't be a Christian coach. I want you to work with people that haven't come into a church in 2 decades. I want you to work with people who are curious, but not sure. He's like, let your faith be a curiosity. Don't have it be a debate.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is, I don't know about you, my brother is amazing. I have an older brother, and he is a full-time missionary in Australia. And we talk about it all the time. I feel like I'm a full-time missionary in the marketplace, which is by definition the largest missionary field in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I say the way that we can be most effective as missionaries in the marketplace is to be a raging curiosity, bring excellence, bring solutions that make people go, how did you come up with that idea? Be encouraging, be grace filled, be strong, right? Be bold, be courageous, all those things. And it's like, St. Francis of Assisi said, spread the gospel, and if needed, use words. And so, I often, when I'm giving, keynotes to large organizations and conferences, some will be very clear. Hey, listen, no faith-based stuff here. And I'm like, hey, that's fine. Right. But everything I teach is based on biblical principles. So I might have a slide that has a timeless quote that says Jewish proverb. That's okay. Right. Middle Eastern proverb. Right. And I'm putting, like, people come up all the time, like, how'd you get away with that? It's like, well, one, it's God's truth, so it's going to resonate. And you can give credit where credit's due, but sometimes we don't have to use all those words that get in the way. But then with my coaching clients too, I always say to my coaching clients, hey, I pray before every session, and if that's your jam, then I'll wait and do it with you. If that's not your brand of vodka, no sweat. I'll just do it before we get on. And most people will say, I'll take 2 scoops of that, like whether that's a big thing for them or not. But God will even work through that. Like I was working with a high level executive, one of my coaching clients, and she said, yeah, I'll take prayer. So we're kicking off the session with prayer. And I always pray, for blessings if they're married, blessings over their marriage, if they've got a family, blessings over their family, blessing over their home, blessing over their business, blessing over their current work, their future work, all those things. And while I'm saying a blessing over her home, after, like a blessing over your home, I get this nudge from God, say homes, not home. Now I don't know. Like, I know basically where she lives, our business profile. I have an address for her so we can mail things to her. So I know she has a home, but I get this nudge, say homes, stop and say homes. So I said, actually a blessing over her homes. Lord, I just pray a blessing over her homes. And we're on Zoom. I'll never forget it. We're on Zoom. She has her eyes closed and her eyes pop open. And so, I continue with the prayer, get done with the prayer. And she's like, how did you know? I was like, how did I know what? And she goes, my husband and I bought a second home last night. It's our dream home. It's our summer home. And all night, I stayed up all night wondering. She's like, I tithe. We're active at our church. But all night, I just had this feeling, what does God think about us buying this home? And I said, well, I'd say he's good with it because I just got the nudge to say Holmes and I didn't know that story. She's like, you
Yeah.
didn't know that story. It's my husband and my lawyer. They're the only people that know that story. So I guess God is okay with it, and that's the kind of thing to me. It's like being a raging curiosity of encouragement and excellence. That's how we, encourage people to maybe believe that God loves them and God wants to work in their life.
Yeah, well, I love it because that's the same way I lead is through curiosity and
Yeah.
being the example, not the one with the megaphone on the street corner. And
Exactly right.
and
Debating.
that's
Yeah, like that's
yeah.
the thing. A shotgun wedding, that doesn't create love, right? Like
Well, I think
there's
where it came
nobody that's
from
been
too.
debated into heaven.
No, exactly. Well, and you can have respectful debate amongst
For
two people
sure.
that can hold space for each other's opinions, but the vast majority of society is not open to that right now. But I
Right?
think where it came from me is like, my father is a believer, but he got really pushed away from the church. It was because
Mm.
people were really pressuring him, and that doesn't work for his personality nor mine.
Yep.
Um, and so I have that context. And then I also have the context of when I owned my financial firm, it was with a Fortune 100 company as a over the top of it, and it was just this really interesting time over the last 10 years. Right, we have this
Yeah.
huge DEI push, which I'm an advocate for some of the teachings of that. Some of them I'm not, but at the same time, they were telling me I couldn't speak about my Christianity and my beliefs because it could offend someone. And it just
Wow.
always wrestled with my soul as like, wait, so me as the leader to be accepting of everyone else, but them not to be accepting of me. Because it's not
Yep.
just what I believe, it's who I am. And I think you would
Right?
agree in that, right? It's part
Yeah.
of who we are. So you're shutting down a part of who we are while at the same time asking us to accept everything about everyone else.
Yep. It's crazy. And it's interesting. I mentioned I'm an extreme personality. I think you are too, right? And in high school, I started to fall in love with American history. And I got hit with this question in high school. How do they teach American history in England? Like how do they teach about the American Revolution
That's
in
a good
England?
question.
And so I went my first year of college, I went to England and went to college, and I took American history and medieval history over there. And what's interesting is that, especially at the college and university level, they teach basically two different types of classes each week. One is a lecture where you go and sit and you're lectured, and then there's the tutorial, which you go. The lecture might be a group of 150 students, but tutorials you usually the professor and maybe three other students, and the whole thing with the tutorial is to debate. And sometimes the professor will come in and throw out an idea, and he might or she might totally disagree with that idea, but he or she throws it out just to see what you'll do with it, right? And the whole goal through Socratic method is to fight it out in an honoring way. Now, not everybody does it perfectly, but I can tell you, if you grow up in that, where healthy debate is not an offense but an expectation, it creates better relationships. It creates better understanding. It creates, better respect of each other's perspectives. And I can tell you, I miss that approach. And again, England is not a perfect country by any means, but I can tell you the people that have had that experience are a lot more open to have healthy conversations on things they don't disagree with. And the last thing they would say is, hey, don't offend me, right? It's like more, hey, why do you believe what you believe?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really good. And so I want to follow this up with, because I know you work with both corporate and entrepreneurs. And I do
Yeah.
believe, because I've been in both spaces, that being in corporate is a bit harder to
Yeah.
express your faith than running your own business. You're the one that cuts the checks. You got the freedom to be able to speak how you want to speak,
Right.
at least a bit more. How
Yeah.
are you coaching leaders to integrate their faith into their business?
That's a great question. I love this conversation. And it's the somewhat frustrating response of, It depends, right? Some
Yeah.
are environments where they have a higher level of leadership, but they also have a culture or maybe an HR regime that doesn't allow anything, right? And I always say, hey, at the very least, you can always model what you believe. And even in the tightest HR environments, and it is interesting how it tends to often be selective in that what is shut down is often like Christian perspective. Like a lot of people are able to talk about whatever they want to as long as it's not more of the commonly held beliefs or whatever. But that's fine. It's the thing of being able to say, hey, if you live it in a way that it makes people curious about who you are, how you make the decisions that you do, wonder why you're grace filled when everybody else is losing their minds and also their ability to communicate and effectively focus. If you can be a raging curiosity, that tends to be the best conversation starter. And I can say, what's interesting about the tightest of HR environments is if somebody comes to you and asks you questions, that often if they're asking the questions and saying, no, I'd really like to know, why do you believe what you believe, or why do you act the way that you do? If that person asks the questions, it can open the door to a very legal conversation, those kinds of things. But I know my faith is bolstered because I sat next to a person when I got promoted into that training department, helping to manage that training department. It was one of those environments where you had to be very intentional, and we were teaching classes pretty much 24/7, 365. You've been in those kind of environments where we were training new reps, we were training on ethics, we were training on new drugs, we were training on everything, just always in the training room. And so they always talk to us about, hey, you can't share your faith, whatever your faith is. These are the guidelines on a number of different things. But a person sitting next to me, a guy named Peter Stuckeman, Peter boldly put a Bible on his bookshelf, and he had a very small bookshelf, but we were in those, it was in the era of open cubicles.
Yeah.
Here we are
Yeah.
managing a $2 billion, training department, and we're in open top cubicles. And he put his bookshelf up high enough. So basically the only book sticking out over his cubicle, you can see the title, Holy Bible, right? And everybody was like, it was always funny because he never said anything like, hey, I'm doing Bible study classes on Wednesday morning, right? He just had that Bible sitting there. And then that was totally okay. It was definitely a curiosity. But what I noticed in sitting next to him in that cubicle, especially when I first started working next to him, was that the most boisterous, the most sometimes caustic people, when they had a low day or when they had a setback, they would come around the corner and sneak into Peter's cubicle and start asking him big life questions. And it was really interesting to just see what that Bible, and sometimes you'd hear it, sometimes he'd slide it off, and sometimes he'd talk about the Bible, but most of the time it was just a signal that let people know, hey, if you got questions, come and talk to me. And that's what I found is if people are asking you questions, that tends to be the best place to start a
Yeah.
conversation like that. So I always say, start by being an example, start by bringing excellence, having grace, having boundaries, with courageous, with courage, but also with compassion. Like, those people that oftentimes are so fired up and so opinionated, it's like, well, nobody's listening to them anyway. So it's that thing. If you can have compassion and courage, but still have hard conversations, that's a person that you want to get to know. That's a person you want to trust. And then those conversations can happen. And what I love is that God works through us, but he can do it a billion different ways, right? I think when we start to put pressure on ourselves to say, oh, I've got to be the example, like God needs me to be a martyr in my corporate space. Like, nah, God wants you to be a curiosity, but do it with love. Don't do it with, debate and,
Yeah.
stances. Yeah.
No, I had a great example of that as well. I had an advisor of mine that I was mentoring, and mentored for years. I knew he was a professed atheist, but he had a law degree, so he was smarter than everyone.
Right.
So he came into my office with a marital problem, though,
Hmm.
and asked me how I deal with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I got to express, my faith and my word and how God's at the center of it. And I could see this like deep contemplation on his face. And he goes, "It must be nice for you." And
Wow.
I said, "It is.
Yeah.
And it could be nice for you too." He goes, "I don't know about that." I said, "Well, you don't have to know about it right now.
Yeah.
You got to explore it because otherwise you're left with nothing." Because he's married to another atheist and they share that belief anyhow, but they were really struggling. And got to share, my wisdom, and whether or not he took to it or, who knows, whether or not
Yeah.
maybe it was just a drop in the ocean to him that could precipitate him figuring out later in life that
Right.
that's
Yeah. It's not
what he
completely on
believes.
your shoulders, right? Like we're called to plant seeds in the season that somebody's in, whether we have a conversation with a cashier or a barista, or whether it's somebody you're mentoring over years, like we don't have to be the one that gets them all the way into heaven. We just get to play a part in walking alongside them, whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 years or more. Right. So I love that. You weren't debating him into heaven. You were just showing him what you believe. And he could see the fruit of that. He could
Yeah.
see you having peace. He could see you and your wife actually, living life and enjoying life and probably experiencing joy that maybe didn't feel possible for him. So yeah, you
Well, it
got to plant those
precipitates
seeds.
questions, right? Like, so he
Yep.
go, "Well, why is my marriage not happy and his is?" Well,
Yep.
there's a question there, and there's an
Yep.
answer. It's not because of happenstance, right?
Right.
There's like you
It's
could
not
believe that
accidental.
it's not accidental, right? So when questions arise, then they can start thinking more deeply and actually figure out what's true for them, what they want to believe going forward. And a
Yep.
different example, I met someone earlier this year at a mastermind, and I know he'll be listening to this because he listens to the podcast now. But leading by example,
Yep.
expressing what I believe, and he was on that curiosity faith walk, and he asked me what Bible I think is best. And he's a leader of a company. I said, "Well, for me to understand better is not just to pick up, the English Standard Version and try and read from front to back." I was like, "I really enjoy John Maxwell's Leadership Bible because I
Yeah.
can read the context of the stories and get his leadership perspective to understand what the Word of God is saying more." Well, happy to report I was out visiting him a week or two ago, and he's almost done with it. He absolutely loved it.
Wow.
So it's just
Wow.
incredible. Like some people are ready to take that leap,
Yep.
and some people
Yep.
may never take that leap. Your calling is to be that beacon
Yep.
and lead by example and plant those seeds, like you mentioned.
Yep. So true. I love that. And it's like it's making the Bible accessible because, there's a lot of different ways to do it, different seasons. I don't know about you, but different seasons, I just fall in love with different Bibles. I've got one right now that's a keyword study Bible that allows you to go deep on different Hebrew and Greek words. And I nerd out on stuff like that. But, especially 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, probably, that wouldn't have resonated with me at all. I needed a different study Bible that allowed me to get context or allowed me to apply it daily. So it's
You need the
amazing the
big pictures
resources
and big
we have.
words.
Right,
Big
exactly
pictures, big
right.
words,
Big
15, 20
and
years
like
ago.
coloring, if there's coloring available.
That's
So I
right.
love it. I've got a Bible. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's an archaeological study Bible. And I was leading a group of teenage boys. And I had, we have two sons and they were teenagers. So I kind of understood what you needed to do to kind of engage teenage boys, but still 15 boys at the end of a long day. And oftentimes in church settings, they want boys to sit around in circles and talk. And I'm like, good gosh, that's going to work a little bit, but not a lot. So this archaeological study Bible, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but what it does is it walks through the archaeology, a lot of these stories. So I would bring the archaeological study Bible and I would flip open to a picture and be like, okay, guys, we just read about the walls of Jericho falling. And it would be interesting. That would be a good story if it was a Hollywood movie or if it was a myth. But look at this picture of the walls of Jericho that they just dug up. And look at this part of the walls of Jericho. Like, what do you suppose that part of the wall that's sticking up higher than any other thing than on that wall? And one of the guys, teenage boys, goes, "Is that where Rahab lived?" It's like, well, kind of what they're thinking. And then the boys crowded around like, wait, what? All that kind of stuff. It's like making that stuff live. Now, again, archaeological Bible, that's not going to light everybody up, but boy, it was a great tool for teenage boys.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Well, kind of on this topic is you created a guide called 11 Prayers for Building a Coaching Business You Love.
Yeah.
What was going on in your life when those prayers became a necessity?
Well, I can tell you for me, like I mentioned, my wife went through a cancer experience, and we experienced 6 miracles in one day, which it was hard to explain away. And I grew up in a really great church, really community oriented church, but prayer wasn't a big thing. And so I kind of had to learn prayer in different ways, in different stages of my life. And the cancer experience with my wife really did bring prayer to the forefront. And I really clung to it. But I then, I could see God, and obviously had seen him work in the church. I had seen him work in hospitals, but there was a part of my mind and my heart that wasn't quite sure he could work in the business place. Like almost in my mind, Josh, you'll understand this. Like I think in my mind, I was thinking, well, when I got in my car and drove away to my job, that God would be like waving, saying, "Okay, see you when you get home." You're like going to the workplace, can't go over there. It's like, but when you look at the Bible, there's story after story. Like some of Jesus' biggest, best miracles were marketplace miracles. Like if you do the math on turning water into wine, the best wine ever tasted by that professional party organizer, he said, "This is the best wine I've ever tasted." That wine would probably be worth about $150,000. That's a marketplace miracle. The feeding 5,000, like think about how many filet of fish sandwiches it would take to feed 5,000 men and their families. That's a marketplace miracle, right?
Well, I
So
have
I
a feeling
started to
that
think, well,
fish was a bit better than McDonald's, but
I'm
yeah.
guessing so. I'm hoping so, right? If it said that there was enough left over and they were satisfied, that wasn't filet o fish,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, wait a second. There's marketplace miracles all over the Bible. So I'm guessing that God still wants to talk to us in our work, in our business. And he's been incredibly generous to us in giving me guidance and giving me peace and giving me favor. And so I just realized that, prayer, some people say, I had a conversation with somebody and they're like, "Gosh, faith, prayer, that just sounds like a crutch." And I'm like, well, yep. And it's a crutch I need. I am happy to admit it. And I said, hey, I understand the neuroscience of what's going on in my brain when I stop and pray. And some people try to put meditation and prayer in the same camp. And some of the things that happen in our brain are similar, and that's fine. But I said, take all of the benefits, the health benefits of meditation, and put on top of that, getting to talk to the creator of the universe. That seems almost like an unfair advantage when it comes to the marketplace. And I will say there have been times where God has given me direction that went against logic or went against understanding or went against what the market would say. And that was absolutely the right call. And there's times where he saved our business or introduced me to the right client at the right time, that kind of stuff. So I just realized like these are prayers. The 11 that we put in are prayers that I lean on a regular basis. And what's beautiful about it, we train up a lot of coaches and speakers, and so we geared it towards that. But really, it's something that anybody in a leadership capacity, even in a parental capacity, these are prayers that will allow you to take your day to day and bring prayer into it, whether it's for direction, encouragement, guidance, discernment, whatever it is. There's those 11 prayers cover a lot of the challenges and opportunities that we face in the marketplace.
It's so good. So good. So in the market,